Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm Summer. I'm the curator here at the museum. Before we get started, please take a second to turn off or silence your cell phones so we don't have any disruptions. While our in-person summer camp is full, we also have a camp to go for sale, which will guide summer campers on a tour around the island. The camp to go is $15 per copy. Please contact Thea for more information. Her card is at that back table underneath the portraits. Keep your eyes open for upcoming information about Fiesta de Santa Maria, which will be held on September 18th in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. As for upcoming programs, our June 3rd on 3rd on the 18th will be with Nick Dionis, who will discuss the history of boat building on the island. And then our July Brown Bag Lunch will be with Francis Flood, who will talk about the history of Yulee and the old Flood store. If you have an evaluation sheet at your seat, please take the time at the end of the program to fill it out and then return it to that basket, also at that table. That's it for my announcements, but today we have Tammi Kosack, who will be making her way to the front soon. Tammi is a Fernandina resident who started her own business 25 years ago called Chair in the Air Designs. It is predominantly an interior and garden design company that focuses on creating enchanted gardens and unexpected interiors. She is also a current member of Fernandina's Historic District Council. So everyone, please welcome Tammi.
Wow, it's a little overwhelming, I must say. Thank you. Now, I want to take up Benjamin on his idea in the back. He said that this is a free event, but I should pass a hat for a house foundation fund. I could use every penny that I could find. Thank you, Summer, and thank you for the board members that are here. This is a great opportunity. And before I get going, I'd just like a show of hands of how many people have been through the museum since it's reopened and since it's been refurbished. Well, that is not enough. You have got to check this out. I mean, I am blown away. We have come into the 22nd century, and I can't wait to bring family and friends here, and it gets me emotional because it's just amazing, and it celebrates this town and this history. Great job. So those of you that know me know that it takes a lot to get me off a ladder and out of my work clothes and doing something other than working on my house. And I have not gotten all the primer off of me. I have not cleaned my fingernails out because it just gets dirty again the next day. But I'm excited to talk about my house. I'm always thrilled to share information that I have found along the way on this journey. And I'm super happy to be here. What I thought I'd do today is share a little bit of my story with some slides and some pictures, and then leave some time for some questions and answers at the end, because people are always fascinated with the process, and there's lots of questions. And then I have some show and tell items at the end if anybody wants to look through. I've got some of my design journals that I use to doodle and come up with ideas, and there's a whole host of photos of the process along the way on two sides, and you're welcome to come up and glance through any of those. So it's July 1st, 2016, and it's a sweltering, steamy, hot Fernandina afternoon, and I just closed on my first house. And I am so excited to drive over to it and to check it out again for the first time since the inspection. And I carefully walk across the front porch, being very careful not to fall through the holes and not to step on the rotted boards that are about to fall through. I unlock the door, ready to greet my new home, and my new home greets me back with a waft of musty air tinged with the acrid, redolent scent of rat pee. I open the door and I go in and I attempt to move the rug that the previous tenant left, but it's permanently affixed to the sticky floor. The floorboards, which have been painted over the years incorrectly with a combination of latex and oil and varnish, and everything stuck, including your shoes, as you walked across the original hardwood floors. I'm also very careful in the front hallway of where I step, because when I did the inspection, often you bring a little marble or a rubber ball or something with you when you're doing inspections if you want to see if there's any foundation problems. You'll put the ball down, and if it rolls maybe a little bit, there's some settling. Well, my house, I could drop a brick, and the brick would roll, and then it would roll this way, and then it would come back to you almost like a boomerang brick. Because it was so uneven, and people did trip. They would have to hang on to things as they pulled through. So I'm just really fired up to get my van unloaded. I open the door, I unlock it, and then the rain came. And it poured and poured, and it was like a solid curtain. You couldn't see through it all. But this too would not deter me. For 15 years, I had been visiting Fernandina Beach. And for 3 years, I looked for the perfect house. And I have to give a handout or a shout out to Susan McEwen, who I saw sneak back in here, who was my very patient realtor for 3 years. And we had a really, a pretty strong set of criteria for the house. I wanted something charming and quirky, something not too old, doesn't need a lot of work, one story, not in the historic district. We had none of those things. So we got an 1885 falling down farmhouse in the historic district, complete with termites, carpenter ants, powder post beetles, and rats.
Oh gosh.
And devoid of a foundation. I told visitors that first year, Dramamine is optional, but highly recommended.
How was it that Susan helped you?
Well, I will say to her credit that when we weren't touring together the 18 million homes, I'll tell you every house that was on the market those 3 years, what the square footage is, what they rented it for, what they sold it for. She toured homes without me and would crawl through things and take pictures and send them to me. Anyway, the house was not as bad as I'm making it seem. It was a rental when I purchased it, and this is how it looked. So other than the sticky floors that you took with you as you walked through, and other than the fact that in the summer I could not get the upstairs cooler than 92, and in the winter I couldn't get the downstairs warmer than 54 in the cold months, it was okay. So I moved in, and I lived in this, I call it my bachelorette pad. I lived in it for a year. And it was important to me to do that, to understand this house, because as a designer, I'm often brought into jobs by clients, and they have a list of wants and needs and desires, or they have problems that I need to overcome. The kitchen's too small, the flow doesn't work, the kids are out, and we need to do things. Well, in this case, I knew nothing about this house, and I knew nothing about how I wanted to use this house. So I was really starting from a blank slate. So there was nothing prescribed to me. And sometimes as a designer, that's the hardest challenge, because the sky's the limit. So I lived in the house for a year, and I listened to it, and I felt it. I watched the sun come up. I watched during the seasons how the sun came up one part on the east, and then it shifted to another part, and then how it set. So I was looking at my windows. How do I want to adjust any windows and openings? I open different windows during different times of the day to feel the breezes. If the breeze comes from the north, do I smell the mill? Do I hear the mill? If it comes from the south, what happens? So I was really looking for cues as to what my future design might be. And I listened to the house, not so much literally, but I listened to the fact that rather than this house, which was a very good candidate for demolition, I decided that this was going to be my rescue mission, and I would restore its soul and celebrate its soul again. And along those same lines, while I was listening to it, I would also listen at night to the little crunch of the carpenter ants above my head. And in the evening, when the rats would come home, they say that the chickens come home to roost. Well, rats come home to roost every night. You could set your clock by it. They would come into the 1940s bathroom that was tacked on. They'd start scratching around the bottom of the tub. Then they'd go up the wall and they'd come across where I was in this room right here. And it created it was great entertainment because I have no internet, I have nothing, just nothing, no TV, nothing. And the cats were fascinated because they had never seen an empty bathtub make so much noise. They would go in there and they would sit, the rats are home, the cats would sit like this, they would watch the bathtub, and then they would both simultaneously, their eyes would go like this. They'd follow the rats into the other room. So at that point we knew it was time to go upstairs. So during this process, two things became imminently clear. I had to get the house tented to evict everybody that was not paying rent, and I had to lift the house. I had to literally lift the building. It was, when I bought it, the front porch was 2 feet below street grade, and it was literally down in a hole. And when I did the inspections, we had to dig out with a little Boy Scout shovel a little trench so we could get underneath it to at least try to shine lights to see what was underneath it and what the foundation looked like. So I knew those two things were the most important aspects. And I thought, okay, great, I'll do these two things, and while I'm doing that, I'll do further research on the building itself, and that will help inform my design decisions. So I spoke with neighbors, anybody that was around that would talk to me, I would talk to them. Do you know who lived here? Do you know who built it? Do you know the family history? I did exploration in the building. I donned my protective gear and I went into the attics. Yeah. And it was a little scary up there, I must say. And I made what I call little secret drywall flaps. I would cut like 3-sided squares in the drywall because it was a rental, and it was fine. So I would cut little squares in the drywall to peek behind, knowing that I could come back easily and patch that up. And I wanted to see, was this a new wall? Was this an old wall? What was original? What was this building? And I wanted to know who added things, when was it added? So I'm just trying to be like a forensic detective at the time. And another thing I did was I called Kelly Gibson at planning. I did not know Kelly at the time, but she pulled the old file for me, and I went downtown and went through all the records of the building. I looked through all the permits that had been pulled over the years. So that helped me know, when was the roof put on? Was there an addition? Was that an original structure? That was super helpful, and one of the things as I was flipping through those files was this photo that I came across. And I was fascinated because, that it still has my little chicken coop windows that I call at the top. It's not much different than how it looked when I bought it. So I thought, well, this is great. I'm getting somewhere. And look, it even had a chimney. Now it doesn't. So I knew there was a chimney at some point. I go a few more pages in the book, and I see this photo.
Oh my.
This is what set my heart on fire. Yeah. So we're thinking this was none of these are dated. This is probably from the 40s or so. But if you notice, there's no chicken coop windows.
Right.
And one of the things that I had already discovered prior to seeing this, when I was doing my little drywall flaps, when I was upstairs, I thought, I don't understand these windows. And all the windows in the house were aluminum. But when I was upstairs, on the inside, underneath, I cut my flaps. And there's nothing. I mean, there's no insulation. You can see outside through the planks. And then there was no framing either. So I put a stick in there. Then I got my tape measure, and you put your tape measure in, 18 inches that way, 18 inches that way. There was a 36-inch window here. So I knew that it had big openings. And that was really important because in the historic district, most of you probably know, when you bring a design to the district, they really don't want you to change the front of the home or the fenestration, meaning the windows, or the orientation. So, I mean, not that they would be upset that I was changing from that to something else, but this gave me extra support to say, here's why I want to go back to these windows. So that's how the building was. It evolved into that, and then that's how it looked when I purchased it. And the other funny thing was this is the one story in the back, and you can't really tell from that picture, but the siding, I like to say it was smiling, but some of the other people in town called it the hammock house or the banana house because it was so sagging so much. As I'm doing more research on the house, let me run back to this one real quick. So there's my house, and I'm doing now architectural research. I'm thinking, okay, we know this is a Florida vernacular house. There's nothing unusual about it. But then I started coming across this time and time again. I said, that's my house. That's exactly my house. And this is an actual architectural style. It's called an I house, and it's capital letter I-house. And an I house is a 2-story front volume with a 1-story addition in the back, which is exactly what mine was. And this is interesting. It's called I house because it's predominantly found in the farmlands of Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana. So there's my little house, and now I'm falling more and more in love with this house, and it's really becoming a torrid affair. And I'm dreaming about it, and every waking moment is dealing with this house. I find the Sanborn maps online, and this was a little bit interesting because in the 1903 map on the left, just below the 17, right here, this is my house, and there was another structure back there, which nobody really knows what it was. And then in the 1909 map, here's the house, and then the structure has either shifted or maybe is mapped wrong, and the lot is a little bit smaller. So while I'm uncovering new things, I'm also finding more questions. So it's kind of a two-way street at this point. My next absolutely amazing resource was right here at the library, at the research library right across the corner. And I spent days there pouring through. The archives are just incredible. And they had everything from, this is the bird's eye map. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. And what I love about this map is this is 1884. The plaque on my house is 1885. But I found this first time that I had seen it, and I have my magnifying glass out, and I'm looking at it, and then right where my pen is, that's my block. So that's North 3rd and Dade, and there's 4 homes on it, and one of them is the exact configuration of my home. So I'm convinced this home was here in at least 1884, if not sooner, because there's no telling how long it took to make that map. So those are some of the things that were available here. And some of the other things which I found fascinating were more people-oriented. Up until this point, I was really focusing on the building and the structure and the way it was put together and the timbers and how it was fabricated. At the library, it really brought a human element to it because they had phone books. And I went through all the phone books. I had looked online at the deeds and looked at all the previous owners and written down their names. So I went to the phone books to see where did they live, are they listed there? And then they have census books. And I went through the census books, and they have the black census and the white census. And I found my home in the black section, and I think we all know that this was the African American section when it was originally established. And my home was listed and had the names of sisters that lived there, and their occupation was listed as seamstresses. Oh. So I'm now developing an affinity for the people that lived in this home. So now it's much more than a building. It's more of a family that I really want to uncover and get to know. And about this time, I had a friend visiting from Texas, and we rode our bikes up to the cemetery, and I wanted to show her a really beautiful grave that I had found up there, and we couldn't find it. We're driving around on our bikes, and we're going through the old section, and we just stopped, and I said, I don't understand it. I don't know where it is. And I stopped and turned my bike. I turned around, and I looked down, and I was just in utter shock, and she said, what? I said, that's the name of the person on my deed.
Oh, wow.
And that one was the one right before him. These were the people I was looking at that I had done all the research for, and we just stopped right there, and I turned around, and they were right there. So another piece of the puzzle was kind of locked into place. Now, there were other names in that plot that meant nothing to me, and I didn't understand it, but I felt such a connection. I took pictures of all of them. I visit this plot all the time. I go up there, and it's like my extended black family. That's my other part of the puzzle. So at this point, we get back to the building and the process, and to ready it for the lift, the first thing that I got approval for was to demolish that old bathroom. We knew it was not historic. It was tacked on in the 40s. The rats loved it. Nobody else loved it. So that was the first thing to go before we lifted the house. This is where the rats would come in. They would scurry up here. They would come through here, and then they would cut across the rest of the house. So that was a very, very uplifting day to have that place gone. Speaking of uplifting, this is the lifting of the house. Now, this was just an incredible process. If anybody has never seen it, IG and the guys are the best of the business. They came in with 40-foot-long I-beams, steel I-beams, underneath that they linked together with massive bolts, and then they put a series of cross members in there, and at each cross piece they had 8 hydraulic jacks. And again, they had to dig under the house just to get these initial beams underneath it, and then they had the cross pieces. And then this is called cribbing. Those are 8x8 structures like railroad ties, and he was like the Wizard of Oz in the back of his truck. He had this big thing, and he had all these gears, and all the guys were like quarter-inch, half-inch, third of an inch, and they would lift it ever so slightly, and it was almost imperceptible. You could not see. This is a 2-story structure. It's 30 feet tall in the front and a 1-story in the back. And they're lifting it up slowly, and here they're about 18 inches or so up from the original stoop. Here I am. It's 60 inches up in the air. So we could walk freely underneath it, and I called it our clubhouse because we would meet underneath the house every day. Say, all right, guys, let's go to the clubhouse. What are we gonna tackle today? And they rebuilt the foundation. Put 31 new piers in there, and some of the surprises along the way were that there was no beam left, or like here. Which this should be a solid plate or beam. Over the years, they jammed anything, and that was the banana part of the house. They jammed 2x4s, and we found broomsticks that were jammed in to either take up gaps or to help with any shifting over the time. So you know that was a pretty big undertaking. One of the things that goes along with lifting a house is that my very carefully precision cut drywall flaps didn't mean anything, because when you lift a house, every bit of drywall cracks. So now this did not happen as a result of the lifting, but the house, I mean, just imagine, over however many years, in various phases of settlement, they put up drywall. So then, when you lift the house to get it level again, the drywall has no place to go, so it cracks and it buckles. And I wrestled with this. I thought, okay, do I patch all those cracks? Do I patch the seams? And I finally said, I gotta take the drywall down. And it was one of the best decisions ever, because as I took the drywall down, the first layer was white, then there was another layer of green, probably done in the 40s, 50s. Behind that was the original, not the original, the remodeled beadboard. Behind that was planking. So this was like the archaeological find of, uncovering all of these things in the house. The drywall, I would just layer up in piles, and look at the preserved beadboard. I mean, that was the beautiful thing about it, that people didn't come in and just destroy things. They covered up. They went over it, which is a really beautiful thing for people in the future that want to work with the old pieces that are in there. This shows a couple of the different layers of the drywall, and then some of the wide planks that were on the wall, the original wide planks. Just beautiful wood. I like this picture because it shows not only the different layers, but look at the window sizes. You have your chicken coops, and look at the original framing, and that's what was in there. And I can't tell you the difference when I opened up those windows, the breezes that come through, the light that comes, and the house finally lives the way the house wanted to live. And after I opened those up, I rarely needed air conditioning upstairs. So it used to be tight and stuffy. They tried to change it, but they changed it the wrong way. One other interesting thing is down here, that's the baseboard. The baseboards in this home are 10¼ inches tall, a full 1¼ inch thick, has a beaded edge, and they're full span. So this one spans 25 feet from this corner to that corner. And when I removed them, it took 3 guys to get the huge cut nails out, and then we had to lower it out the window, and it literally went out the window, and we had the top and the bottom was touching the ground. That's how long it is. So they built these homes to last. That shows a little bit of the planks that we discovered, and it had also some fragments of wallpaper, which was really interesting. So this is where I get a little weird, and maybe the process gets a little weird. But at this point, I'm so attached to the wood in this house, and every bit and every piece of everything in this house, nobody knows what to throw out and what not to throw out. So basically nothing got thrown out. And I think you'll understand that as we get further, but I started just saving, I found bricks, and I put the bricks up, and then here's one of those baseboards. So I tried to make a baseboard section. Here's some old timbers, and even though part of it was rotten, well, I could maybe make something out of the other part, so don't throw it out. It could be a podium. I don't know what it could be. And the wood just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I tried to keep it organized, and you do the best you can, and before I put it on the piles, I would remove all the cut nails. And I have jugs of cut nails and sometimes I would just sit out there, and it would be a nail removing day, and I would remove all the nails. And then inside, even smaller pieces, I thought, I don't really want to throw this stuff out, because 1, they don't make it like this anymore. 2, they don't grow it like this anymore. I mean, there's some of the things, and I brought a little bit of show and tell, my magic box. So the floorboards in this house,
Wow.
that's a tongue. That's like a cow tongue, and that's the groove. That's a solid 1 inch or 1 inch plus, and this is the narrower one. Some of them went up, 10 inches wide, and this is heart pine. And if you see the grain in it, I don't know if you can see it, but it's very tightly formed. These are the growth rings on the wood, and this is old growth pine, and that's why it's so heavy and it's loaded with tannin. This is a new piece of wood. Look at the growth rings. The growth rings are a 1/4 inch apart. Here they're a 32nd maybe apart. And that's the difference between old wood and new wood. And like this, they plant quickly. It's a different species, and they load it up with steroids and growth hormones, and then they cut it down. So this is what was so important to me throughout the home. And it's not just in the floor. It's in the timbers. I mean, this tight growth, you would cut it with a saw, and it's almost like it polished itself. This is what was so critical to me that was saved. And even if I didn't use it, somebody could use it, whether for another restoration or for an art project or something. So I did get a little weird about my wood, but I still have it. This was the cook's kitchen. So one of the things that these homes typically had done was you had the 2-story in the front, then you'd walk out to a side porch, and then you'd go into an exterior door to the cook's kitchen. They separated that from the main home for either the smell of the cooking or fire or whatnot. So my house, you would walk down the hall, which had since been enclosed, and then you'd come into this cook's kitchen. And when I was in my exploration discovery phase, I went up into this attic, and this room they dropped the ceiling, so it had a lower ceiling in it, and it was a drywall ceiling. When I went up into that attic, I could see that space, that extra 2 feet of space, and I thought, this has a 10-foot ceiling in here that had been dropped over the years, and it had the planks in there. And then when I went up to the top, I saw those rafters. And this is the type of material. It's beautiful, solid wood. And I thought, those are all being saved. We are going to build it. Well, everybody thought I was crazy. We can't build around those. There's no way. Well, we couldn't, because when we lifted the house, the whole south side of that wall started falling. There was nothing holding it in, so the guys had to get dead men and weights and a bobcat and literally push that wall back up to temporarily secure it. So this structure was so gone. The interior drywall was some of the only things that was holding it up. However, what we did do was saved all the rafters, took them down, and they got stored inside the house. I didn't want those to go outside, so I saved all of those. I cleaned them and numbered them. Here they are numbered. And they're going back. I've rebuilt this room. It will now be my library. And they're going back on the ceiling, and they'll be exposed. So you can see them and celebrate them. And they're right where they lived for 130 years. They're going right back, but we can see them. My outside wood keeps growing. We're coming up on the 5th anniversary, and the 5th anniversary is wood. So I feel like I'm doing something right. This actually, for those in the know, this is actually progress, because what you see happening on the right side here is culling of the wood. So now I'm not just stacking it, I'm actually culling it and measuring it, cleaning it, and then I have it stacked up. After I clean it with vinegar and borax and scrub it, and then put it in the sun to dry, and I put it up there. And before I did stack it all outside, I had measured the critical pieces. So I knew what I really wanted to celebrate in this house were either the unusually wide material or the unusually long pieces of material. So some of these 20-foot pieces of beadboard, I worked into the design wanting to show that here's a full span of beadboard. So I would create beadboard areas that would celebrate those 20-foot lengths of beadboard. This is the back of some of the planks that was in the 1-story. And this was such a happy surprise, because when I was cleaning, I would clean the painted side first and then flip them over to clean the other side. And they had incision marks from when they did the construction, the order of how to put them up on the walls. And some of those I will flip and use decoratively. But to give you an idea, this is one of those planks. Look at the width of that. And it's not bowed or cupped or warped 130 years. It's tongue and groove, and this was on all the planks. The other great thing that this provided me with was these little clues with paint colors. And I just loved uncovering, there was a varnish red, there was a green, and I found all these different colors that they had used over the years. And I recently had a friend ask me, they said, you plan everything in advance. I'm sure you know exactly what all your colors would be. I said, you know what? I have no idea. Because I want the house. The house will tell me eventually what the colors will be. Here's one other piece that was in there, and this shows some of the different greens that they had used. And at the time, pigments were very limited. And some of it is milk paint. When you wash it, it just goes away. So I'm careful how I preserve some of those things. The beadboard, thick 1/2-inch beadboard, and again, I was able to take this out. The stuff is hard and it's brittle, but it's so strong. And this has different colors on it. And one of the really neat things was when you go to the historic district, you have to present everything right through to your colors for the exterior of the house. And I knew what I wanted to do. I had that done, and I was getting a little bit of crazy on the front of the house. And as I've been scraping the house, there is this rather aggressive bluish color, and it's the exact shade of what I got approved at the historic district for the ceiling and the floor of the front porch. So I feel like that, the house kind of led me to get that in the right direction. Here's some of those long planks that I told you about. So these, because it's a limited quantity or limited commodity really, I labeled each one and I had the sizes set up so I would know where I could use them when they went back into the structure. This is what was the one-story cook's kitchen, which is now my library, and these are those planks reinstalled, and then some of the rafters in front of it. And that's another view, and this is before these will go up on the ceiling. And that room will have 2 walls of the old planks and 2 walls of new drywall. And my driving visioning statement for this house was that I always wanted it to have a benevolent tension between the centuries. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want one century to fight another, and I didn't want to make a fake, historic looking house. So I really wanted to celebrate the old and then celebrate almost with like German Bauhaus cleanliness, the new. And I wanted to make that very easily discernible of what was old and what is new. So there's a lot of that juxtaposition of the old and new throughout the house. This is the part that everybody always loves. What did you find? I found a whole lot of dirt, a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, a lot of tears. So looking back at my rental hallway, it really doesn't look that bad anymore. So that was the rental of when I lived in it, the hallway. And this, I came to find out after we lifted the house and looked at it, this was the back side porch, or the back of the side porch. So they would come through the front door, this was the door, they'd come onto the porch, and then go into the cook's kitchen. And that room was always so strange. It was like this weird, long room. It just didn't make sense. It didn't feel right. And as I started taking down that drywall, the original siding to the house was still back there. So that's all the cedar siding from 1880, whatever. That was a crying moment. I mean, there were times in the house when I was just exhausted and filthy. I didn't think I could do another thing, and then invariably something would open up, and it would be like that little push that you needed just to keep going. And that was one of those moments. I mean, I would just stare at that siding. I would go in and look how beautiful that siding is. Coming from the other direction, this is the living room looking through into that one bedroom. The one story. This is the 2-story here, and that goes into the 1-story. And when I started removing this wall, that's when I found all of that very large planking in it. And I found another doorway to the back. And then when I went around where I'm standing on the back side of that and started removing my layers of drywall, the original back door to the house. Yeah. And then, I could have looked at that for 100 years and just sat there. So, those are the times when you wonder how many hands touched this house, how many people opened this door, what did they do coming in and out? Where was the chicken coop? Where was the outhouse? What are they doing here? And the people are coming back into my head, like, how did they live in this house? And there's more siding that I discovered. So all of that has been saved. That's planking, and then there's another little window in there. And what I love about that is to the left of that window, to the right here. I know all of you will remember this. Do you remember those little chrome towel bars? They had they were kind of ridged, and they had the little hexagonal, you know those ones? Yeah. That's what was hanging right there, because it was like the little hexagonal. The room must have been pink at one time, and then it had those little spots. So, in my head, I would fantasize about these people. I thought, wow, when they got water, they were right in here, doing something at the sink, looking out the window, and they had their towel right there. So that window had been covered up over the years, and there's siding over it. I did not know about that, so I didn't have that in my plan, and it's also quite low. But what I'm doing is I saved the frame, and this is now in my kitchen, and I'm making that an open spice cabinet. So the frame and the window and the opening will still be there, and I can tell people about the orientation and where it was and how it was set up in there. Other discoveries are not so great. So I was very excited to find some beautiful wood when I opened up a vase and look at this wood, and it just crumbled in my hand. So that's the termites that kind of wreaked a little bit of havoc on it. Upstairs, this is back in the time of my drywall flaps. This was a much larger drywall flap. I think I knew at this point I would be removing all the drywall. That's a chimney chase up there, and I found wood and some wallpaper in front of it. And on the back side of it was brick. Now, he was not in the chimney, nor were his bones or his medals. Extra credit, does anybody know who that is? Come on. I didn't either. It's John J. Pershing. He was an admiral in World War I. And this was covering this hole. And this was, I will not hand this out because it's really preserved and it's delicate. He ran for president in 1920. And on the back it says, compliments of E.F. Franz, a dealer in staple and fancy groceries, Fernandina, Florida. So that was the gold. That was really the gold. And those were the things that really, really kept me going. This I found outside when we were doing the foundation, and it says McAllister's Mockingbird Food, New York. Those were also the things that made me very enthralled to find out more about the people that lived in the home. I'm from New York originally. I was born there. And I thought, why? Well, first off, what's mockingbird food? Yeah. And why would they bring it down here from New York? But I gained more of want to learn about these people. And at this point, I'm very entrenched in the home in itself, but I'm still thinking about these people. Mm-hmm. Things like this would add to that. It's one of the wallpapers that I found. There were 7 different wallpapers that I uncovered, and I have fragments of all of them. And I had a photographer archive them and take pictures of them in place where they came down. And things like that, I would think, who chose that paper? Why did they choose it? Where did they get it? Who put it up? Why did they put that in that room and that in that room? Just like we make the same decisions, you wonder those things about the people. This is a carpenter's square, along with, I found $1.38, mostly in pennies and nickels. But the carpenter's square, when we were lifting the house and we were underneath that enclosed side porch, I was in the clubhouse with the guys, and we were kind of looking up, determining, which beams should be replaced, what can be salvaged. And I looked up, and I saw this little black something. And I didn't have gloves on, shame on me. And I looked up, and I thought, what is that? And I just reached up intuitively to grab it. Luckily, it was nothing more than the corner of this. And I pulled it out, and the guy's eyes got bigger and bigger. I said, look at this. And it's got copper metal on it and copper ends. And I looked at it, had some markings on it and names, and I looked it up. It was from 1932, and intact, it was worth like $30,000. This end was broken. It was worth $1.27. So I did have enough money that I could have bought it with what I found if I bought it on eBay. So I could sell it on eBay and double what I found, but I will keep that in the house. So at this point, I'm even more wondering about the people that lived in it, and when they decided to enclose that porch, did they do it themselves? Did they hire somebody that left their carpenter's square? These were the things that kept me up at night. Upstairs, on the reverse side of that chimney, in the wallpaper, I found that safety pin, just like that. And if you remember from the census, the occupations listed were seamstresses. So this was right below one of the stovepipes. So surely they had a potbelly stove. They had one of the old irons on the stove, and they would do their dressmaking, and then they would iron it. So I remember when I was going through a lot of the demolition, my mother would say to me, "Are you afraid in that house alone? Is it spooky?" And I was never frightened in this house. It has such a good energy and such a good spirit, and I always felt happy there. So even when I was going through hard times, there was a time when I was up in the attic. It was 115 degrees, and I had to suit up completely because I was cleaning it out. Now, normally when we clean out an attic, we're pushing boxes around and taking tricycles out. I was literally shoveling debris out of this attic. It was full of coal dust and soot, about that deep in between each of the rafters up there. So I had my headlamp on, I was completely covered, it's 1,010 degrees, and I'm shoveling coal dust. I got 7 5-gallon buckets of coal dust out. And I leaned back and I caught my arm on a rusty nail, and it just started bleeding, and it's combining the blood and coal dust, and I sat back and I thought, I couldn't be happier. I am so happy right now. I love this house. So about that time, after the coal dust event, I did develop an upper respiratory and even when I would unmask, it was days that I was eliminating coal dust from here. I took the day off, and I'm living in the garage apartment in the back of the house right now, still. And I took the day off, and it was so hard for me to be away from this house. And I thought, let me just go get the mail, and I'll just check on the house, make sure it's still there. So I went down to get the mail, and I see this car driving really slowly by, which, as you know, Jay, is not unusual. I know. And then the car comes back, and I thought, it's funny. So I go and I said, do you need some help? And it wasn't unusual because people wanted to see, what's happening with the house that's being lifted in the air. And this really distinguished looking man with salt and pepper hair and a very thin mustache, African American, he says, "Oh no, I'm just looking at the progress that you're making on the house." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And I was kind of bored because I was, not in the house. I said, "Do you want to see inside?" And he looked at me. His eyes got so big, and he said, "Yes, because I grew up there." Oh, no. My great-grandfather built that house. Oh. And I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Eddie DeLyons." And I said, "Eddie, I've been looking for you for 3 years. I've been calling Brooklyn and Queens and Orlando. I've gone to the cemetery. I've looked up your family." And then we both start just crying. So we walked through the house, and he must have spent about an hour. And Eddie, if you're watching, I can't wait to see you again. He told me stories, and this was the coolest thing, all about Fernandina. And he lived in the late 40s and 50s. And he told me about his aunt, Aunt Minnie, the seamstresses, and he said it was a happy place. I said, "Well, what was it like?" He said, "It was such a happy place. We played with the chickens. We ran up and down the steps. They have the big giant step at the bottom they call the jumper step, and to this day it's about this tall." And he told me how when they got electric there, it was still kind of scary. Everybody was afraid of electricity. And if you guys, since you haven't been through the museum, go to the section where they show you when electric was brought to the island, because the homes had these big, giant, like Frankenstein, fuse breaker things. And they had one of these in my house. And Eddie said whenever they had thunderstorms or electrical storms, they would all go in there and they'd throw the fuse and then they'd run into the front living room that they called the electrical storm room. Because they were afraid of this, is this going to draw something into the house? So now my living room, which has been the wood storage room, is the electrical storm room. And I think we'll keep calling it all of those things. And then he told me how the house for years just had cold water. And then they would heat the water on the stove. And then they got really fancy and they got a kerosene stove. And his mom would give him a nickel and he would run down the road to Blair's candy store and he would get kerosene. And they would bring it back and pour the kerosene into the stove to have hot food and hot water. The other great memory that he had was sitting on the front steps and on the front porch and watching the ships and the shrimpers go by. And he said the breeze would come in there. I said, oh, I know, I get it from the second floor. And sure enough, he said, yes, if you open that window and that window. I said, exactly. That's what I do. And you get this cross breeze that comes in there. And he said they would watch the shrimpers and the sailboats go by. And then the fishmongers would come up 3rd Street, and if you wanted fish or shrimp, you just yell at them, tell you what they want. The kids would run out and they'd do a little bit of an exchange, and then they'd have their fish dinner. So what Eddie did, we did a family tree together, and he plugged all the pieces together for me for all those graves that I didn't know in the plot. So now all of those things made sense. At one point when Eddie and I were walking through the house, I got a little emotional. You never know how somebody might take what you're doing to their home where they grew up. Are you taking too much license? Are you changing it too much? So as much as I was honoring this house, I was really hopeful that I wasn't stepping on his memories and the intention that his ancestors had. And he allayed those fears. At one point, he touched my arm and he said, it looks like the right person got this house. And what Eddie didn't know was that before I purchased this house, I was diagnosed with a rare incurable disease. And the specialist said that I had to go on a lifelong battery of steroids in order to manage the disease. We could never cure it. And after looking through the side effects and what my life might be, I chose not to do that. And I went a rather alternative, non-conventional route with different modalities. And I was housebound for about a year. And when I got myself stable enough, my very first trip was back here to Fernandina. So this was my test trip. And when I got back here, I knew that this is where I had to do my next project. And the house became a metaphor for my own healing. So I rebuilt the house from the foundation up, and I had to do that with my own health as well. So what Eddie didn't know was that I wasn't the one that was saving this house, but this house had been waiting to save me.
Wow.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, questions? Concerns? See the house. Well, here's a funny little story. Did I see Sal Camilla in here somewhere? Okay, so Sal comes to me, was it 2 years ago now, or was it?
About 2 years.
You know, silly Sal. He's like, he says, 2 years ago, he says, oh, well, where's your house going to be in May? And I said, what year? He said, do you want to be on the preservation tour? I said, what are you, crazy? And then I thought, this is really a good learning opportunity. So we developed this whole scheme, and we put it on as the In Progress House. So this was on the tour 2 years ago. I think I met some of you there for the first time. And what I really wanted to celebrate there is I wanted to teach people. I want to teach people the importance of preservation, the importance of our architectural heritage, our history, our cultural history, and the people that lived here and settled here. So the short answer to your question is he's trying to twist my arm, and I guess we'll have to call it in progress still.
Yeah, good.
So maybe this year, we'll see.
You were questioning the mockingbird food. I'm a bit of a bird enthusiast. Never heard of mockingbird food per se, but I encourage mockingbirds and blue jays around my property because they chase the hawks away and keep them off my chickens.
Interesting. And that could have been the case because they had the chicken coop in the back.
And crows also, although it seems the mockingbirds chase the crows away. But they're also quite valuable for keeping hawks off.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, well, I have a whole collection of those bottles, and of course everything got researched in the evenings and to see where it is. And I have just a ton of bottles that we've had, and some apothecary jars and little ink wells. And really beautiful pearlescent glasses and things, and lots of liquor bottles near the outhouse. I've never had so many liquor bottles. Any other questions?
Tammi, is that the most recent photograph?
Well, as of 2 days ago, but now I've got this side primed, and I've got that side primed. So if you come by in maybe a week, I might have paint on it. More paint on the house than on me, but we're getting there. I'm scraping off 130 years of paint, and so far I've found 8 different colors that the house has been.
So do you come and help people do their houses? I down the street.
Everybody is I do.
Yeah, okay, great.
Tammi, it's been my extreme pleasure to be considered a friend. And would you mind just giving us a very quick story of your miracle recovery?
Which one?
Which one? Let's see, if I was a cat, I'm kind of pushing 6, I think. So, last February, so this ladder was extended all the way to the top, and it was on the back, and I was staining the back porch. And actually, no, I take that back. I was on scaffolding, and I was getting a funny smell like liquid natural gas. I thought there must have been something in the air. I was getting a little lightheaded. I called Faith, who lives down the road, Faith Ross. And I thought, she said, call 911. The guys come out, they can't find anything, and I said, I heard an explosion last night. Maybe it's West Rock. The guys get in their rig, and the rig is idling at the base of my driveway, and I'm on the back on that ladder. I get back up on the ladder, and I'm painting. And anybody that does anything for a long time, you start to take, less precaution that you should. So I'm painting, and I can't quite reach that spot, and I'm painting, and I'm on one-point contact like this, and the ladder went like this, and I went backwards in slow motion. I finally let go of the ladder. I landed on the steps on my back. My head hit the concrete. The ladder landed on top of me. I could not breathe. I could not talk. I could not move. But I could watch the rig idling at my driveway. And I said, please turn around. And they went off. So the end of the story is I broke my back in 2 places. And it was a miracle that I didn't do more damage. I was on my back for about 4 months, 3.5, 4 months, and then had to do a complete physical recovery after that. And now I'm back. Back up on the ladder.
Your poor mother.
Are you watching, Mom? So my mother, the questions that normally comes up is, oh, when will you be finished? and I tell everybody, I said, look, here's what I've told my mom. The two questions you cannot ask is when will you be done and how much will this cost? Because I tell everybody that I will be the little old lady living in the unfinished $1 million house on food stamps.
How did you find Bernadina?
Oh, well, Andy Mock. Anybody know Andy and Lynn Mock? Remember Andy Mock? They did many homes in town. Andy was one of my very first contractors in Atlanta, and that in my design business. And he and his wife Lynn came down here for years, and back in the day when it was just little Fernandina, and he always said, you would love Fernandina. And this was probably now 18 years ago or more. And so that's how I came down. And it was an annual event, stayed at all the different beds and breakfasts, and then migrated to the Addison. I see Shannon over there, and that became the favorite place to stay at the Addison on Amelia until I decided to take the plunge and buy.
Yeah, what a story.
We're better off.
Thank you.
Well, up here, guys, I've got photos. If anybody wants to flip through, there's wood you can pick up and touch and feel, and I'll be available for questions if you've got any more. Thank you so
Thank you all for coming. Please fill out your evaluation if you have one.